This video will give you the full account we can reconstruct of one of America's most infamous solo rampages. The day a welder named Marvin Heemeyer transformed a bulldozer into a fortress and attacked his own town. During those 2 hours, he destroyed 13 buildings, caused nearly $7 million in damage, and yet no one but Heemeyer lost their life. You'll see how the smallest disputes, like a blocked sewer line, grew into years of frustration, and how secret preparations turned his anger into action. Some remember him as a folk hero, others as a criminal. To understand why, we need to start with who he was.
God blessed me in advance for the task that I am about to undertake. It was sometime in 2001, I believe.
Marvin Heemeyer's story truly begins long before the bulldozer. Born in South Dakota in 1951, he joined the Air Force as a young man and later built a career on his skill with metal and machinery. He moved to Colorado in the mid-1970s, eventually settling in Grand Lake by the late 1980s. In 1992, he bought a 2-acre property at auction in nearby Granby for about $42,000. Land he used to open his Mountain View muffler shop shortly after. The shop earned him steady business and a reputation for precise, reliable work. Friends remembered him as intelligent, capable, and sometimes even charming. But those same people also noted a stubborn streak and a willingness to hold grudges, a trait that would define his later years. For a time, Granby offered him both community and stability. His muffler shop stood just off town roads, and he took pride in his craftsmanship. He could come across as likable, and some saw him as someone willing to help. Yet even during these years of success, others noticed a harder edge, an intensity that appeared whenever he felt wronged or unrecognized. In a small town where conflicts over zoning or business rights easily spilled into personal disputes, Marvin's inflexibility meant that these tensions often lingered instead of fading away. His problems began in earnest with something deceptively mundane: sewage. The property he bought had no formal sewer hookup, just an improvised system using an old concrete mixer buried in the ground. Town officials required him either to install a proper septic system or to connect to the municipal sewer line. Marvin resisted both options, arguing over costs and responsibilities and refusing to comply. When developers later moved to build a concrete batch plant next to his land, construction there effectively cut him off from the sewer line. He saw this as deliberate, another sign that officials were siding against him. The town fined him about $2,500 for violations and later held him in contempt for failing to resolve his sewage setup. What might have remained a routine code issue instead became one of Marvin's long-lasting grievances. The concrete plant dispute escalated matters further. The Duchef family, who owned the land, pursued years of planning to establish Mountain Park Concrete. Marvin fought back at every step, filing appeals, challenging zoning approvals, and even taking the matter to court. His lawsuit was eventually dismissed, but he never accepted the rulings as fair. To him, the plant threatened not just his business with noise and dust, but his entire livelihood. Every turn in the process, from council votes to legal defeats, deepened his conviction that town officials were corrupt or indifferent to his concerns. On the surface, Marvin still played the part of a neighbor and shopkeeper. But beneath that, his disputes began to consume him. Friends who once saw only his humor and warmth now remembered flashes of temper and an obsessive focus on settling scores. His welding skills, once dedicated purely to exhaust systems and steel frames, took on a new dimension. Each setback fed into a growing belief that conventional channels would never bring him justice. It was this conviction, that the system itself had shut him out, that transformed his skills into something far more dangerous. And it set the stage for the secret project that would redefine how the town remembered him. What followed was unlike anything his neighbors could have imagined: the conversion of a standard work machine into something built for war. In 2002, Marvin purchased a Komatsu D355A bulldozer. At first glance, it seemed like a practical acquisition for a welder and machinist, whether for land clearing or rental work. But by late 2003, he had sold most of his property, leased half of his old building back, and erected a partition in the shop. Behind those closed doors, in near secrecy, he began an 18-month project that would take place mostly at night and away from curious eyes. Inside that hidden workspace, the bulldozer underwent a radical transformation. Marvin welded layers of steel plate onto the outside, and in key areas reinforced them with concrete. In some places, the combined armor was reported to be nearly a foot thick. The cab was sealed so completely that it had no conventional doors. To enter, Marvin relied on a welded roof section that could only be lowered into place by a crane. Once inside, he had effectively locked himself into a shell that no one could breach quickly. Police would later spend hours with cutting torches and explosives trying to break in after it was finally disabled. The systems he built into the machine showed the same precision he was known for in his welding work. He fitted multiple video cameras on the exterior and shielded them with bullet-resistant Lexan. To ensure visibility, he added compressed air nozzles that could blast dust and debris away from the lenses. Inside, he installed fans and even an air conditioner to prevent the cabin from overheating, giving him the ability to remain sealed inside for hours. Every detail reflected careful planning, aimed at ensuring he could stay protected while still controlling the machine effectively. He also prepared for offense. Firing ports were cut into the armor, aligned to allow barrels to emerge. Investigators later found positions for a .50 caliber rifle, a .308, and a .22 caliber, in addition to handguns Marvin carried inside with him. To outside observers, it meant that the armored bulldozer was not only resistant to attack, but equipped to fight back if necessary. When authorities later attempted to stop the machine with gunfire, those modifications showed just how resistant it had become. Perhaps the most chilling details came from recordings Marvin left behind.
You know, things may have gone different, but God built me for this job. He rewarded me for 45, 50 years with the lifestyle that I am so thankful for.
In them, he described the project as guided by something beyond himself, as if he were executing a mission he believed had been chosen for him. He kept a long list of people and organizations he considered enemies, reinforcing the idea that his plan was neither random nor impulsive. For him, the construction was part of a larger purpose, one that seemed both personal and unshakable. What made a quiet tradesman commit 18 months to a project like this? The answer became clear on one June morning when the machine finally emerged from his shed, no longer hidden but unleashed. The 2 hours that followed would shake Granby like nothing before. On the afternoon of June 4, 2004, starting at about 2:15 p.m., Marvin Heemeyer's armored bulldozer roared to life against its first target, Mountain Park Concrete, the business he saw at the center of his grievances. With steel-clad treads grinding forward, the machine ripped into buildings while employees scrambled for safety. Some workers rushed to jam debris into the tracks, but the bulldozer pushed on unhindered. Owner Cody Dochev climbed into a loader in a desperate attempt to intervene, but gunfire from Marvin's firing port struck the equipment and forced him back. From there, the bulldozer rolled south onto Agate Avenue, moving at no more than 5 miles an hour. Slow as it was, there seemed no way to bring it down. Officers fired some 200 rounds into the armor to no effect, and one undersheriff climbed onto the machine, dropping a flashbang into the exhaust pipe. It fizzled harmlessly, leaving him to leap off as debris flew. Recognizing the danger to public safety, authorities initiated a reverse 911 phone alert to evacuate residents ahead of the destruction. Marvin pressed on with targets tied to his long-running disputes. Granby Town Hall, where a library program where children had just finished, was evacuated minutes before he plowed through its walls. The Liberty Savings Bank's corner office, connected to a zoning board member, was shredded next. He drove on to the Sky High News office and several businesses with links to old conflicts, cutting down traffic lights and utility poles along the way. Law enforcement tried a road scraper, tear gas, and continued gunfire. Yet nothing worked. The danger spiked when Marvin turned toward a propane storage yard. He fired 15 rounds at tanks holding about 30,000 gallons of fuel, enough to devastate the area. Police quickly evacuated a 1,000-yard radius, including a nearby senior housing complex, fearing one spark could destroy much of the town. He also fired at nearby transformers, narrowly avoiding what could have been an even greater disaster. By now, state and local officials were running out of options. Members of the Colorado State Patrol later set extreme measures, including anti-tank weapons and even an Apache helicopter strike, were discussed. The governor's office, however, denied authorizing such force. Sources conflict, but what is clear is that officials feared collateral damage might exceed the ongoing destruction. The end came at Gamble's store, a hardware business tied to another of Marvin's disputes. As the bulldozer tore through the building, one tread sank into an unseen basement. The machine's radiator and hydraulics began leaking, the engine faltering. Trapped and unable to free it, Marvin stayed inside. At about 4:30 p.m., officers heard a single gunshot. When police eventually cut their way through the steel armor, they found he had died by suicide with a handgun. The rampage lasted 2 hours and 7 minutes. In that time, Marvin destroyed 13 buildings and caused nearly $7 million in damage. No one else was killed or seriously hurt, a fact some called restraint, others nothing more than luck. What those hours left behind was not just wreckage, but the lasting question of what years of anger and belief can drive a single man to do. Supporters argue he was pushing back against corruption, while critics see him as an extremist who turned conflict into catastrophe. Part of why the story endures is the evidence he left behind. Before his rampage, Marvin recorded 6 audio tapes, about 2.5 hours in total, mailing them to his brother and the FBI. His own words still fuel debate over motive versus method. So what do you think? Was he a wrong man who snapped, or a dangerous extremist? Share your thoughts in the comments. His rampage was the product of years of grievance and careful planning, an understanding that ARC may be the closest we can come to an answer.